Welcome to the Multifamily Investor Nation podcast. I'm your host, Whitney Elkins Hutton, Director of Investor Education here at PassiveInvesting.com. And I'm so excited to be joined today by Mike Moe. Mike, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm super excited.
Excellent. Well, before we dive into Copper Canyon, 77 units in Tucson, Arizona, tell us a little bit about yourself, how you got into multifamily real estate and where you're at today.
Yeah, so probably a similar story to a lot of people. Corporate dropout. Went into multifamily. I was in the tech field for a little bit at one of our Fortune 500 companies, and it wasn't bad, but I had a situation back in 2013 that kind of put me on a path of pursuing financial freedom through real estate investing, and that was a situation that a lot of people are dealing with right now, which is a jobless scare. Yeah, I went to my work one day and they told me that they had different plans. The whole company was reorganizing, and my position didn't exist. So that was a position that I didn't really want to ever find myself in again. So kind of went down the path of Dave Ramsey for a little bit and some other things, and then I found real estate investing and dove right in.
I can so identify with that journey. I mean, for me, it was 2017 or 16, really. Like I had the essentially a 12-month head start that my position was disappearing. It was like, well, I might as well turn 2 rentals into 20 as quickly as possible. So I can
Yeah.
so identify with that. Well, let's dive into Copper Canyon, 77 units in Tucson, Arizona. When did you close on this property and what was the purchase price?
August of 23, we closed on it for just under 8.5. So it was 8.475 was the purchase price.
Okay. And when did you first find this deal?
Wow, that's a great question because it was the beginning of 2023. So we were under due diligence and under the negotiation period for 4 or 5 months, I think, is until we actually closed it, which is we found it off market because if it was on market, we probably had never had the luxury of having that much time. But because we had it off market, we had a little bit more time and there was a lot of back and forth with the seller. But yeah, it was early in that year. It was a long process.
Can you tell us what it was originally listed for or on, off market for? What did the seller
Over
originally want?
Yeah, over 10. So it was over 10 million, which honestly, from a comps perspective and from a cap rate perspective, there's a lot of things that we're selling for that would justify the $10 million sale price. But the sellers just weren't running it as efficiently as they should have been. And that brought the price pretty low from based on where they started at. So yeah, it's a little over 10, like 10.2, I think is what they wanted.
All right. So tell us how you got this under contract. Was there any other competition or was it just your group?
No, it was just our group, which is kind of the benefit of we had a little bit of a foothold in that market and have a couple other properties. Actually, we had one that is less than a quarter mile away, which has led to some operational efficiencies that the other owners weren't able to get because this was the only property in the market. So it was off market, brought to us by a broker, and there was no other competition, which, like I said, which is basically the whole reason why we got 4 or 5 months to go back and forth with the seller, get our due diligence done, and get a little extra time on capital raising that we needed because it was 2023 was a tough time from that perspective. So yeah, off market, no real competition, and it gave us a lot of extra time that we needed
How did you structure your contract then?
for due diligence.
Yeah, I mean, your purchase sale agreement, did you have like 30 days for due diligence, 30 days to close, and extensions? What kind of earnest money did you put down? Like, how did you get the seller to sign on the dotted line?
Yeah, well, thankfully we're kind of beyond the times of hard earnest money day one without seeing the property. This was in early part of 2023, which things had slowed down transactionally a ton at that point in time in that market. So we were able to go in the earnest money. I should think of what it was off the top of my head. I want to say it was in like the 30 to no, it's $50,000. So $50,000. We had 30-day due diligence, but we had two, and we had 30-day DD, 30-day close, but we had a bunch of extensions kind of built in there that we could use as needed. The sellers also wanted a 1031, so we knew that they weren't going to press us for time because they had not ID'd the property and they wanted a little extra time as well, which ended up coming back to kind of bite them in the end. Is we got a few things out of them towards the end of that due diligence, which benefited us and our investors. But yeah, so it was definitely a lengthy process. We did have to put a little bit more earnest money when we did the extension, but it was still all non-refundable. We had a couple clauses in there that really helped us during due diligence performance clause, which was gives about $140,000 credit that the seller gave us at the end too.
All right. Well, let's talk about due diligence. Um, you when did you first land on site? How many did you walk all the units? How did this all turn out for you?
Yeah, so we hired a company to help with the due diligence, to help organize everything. But we were on site, I want to say it was end of May, early June. And yes, we walked every single unit. So we got the property manager that was on site that the sellers had employed. We went through every unit. We had a nice lengthy spreadsheet where we're making notes on literally every unit. One of the things that the seller had told us is that every unit was fully renovated. So we had got some pictures of the interior units before we put it under a contract. And the sellers had basically said, yeah, every unit looks just like this. And we couldn't verify that obviously until we went into due diligence. So what we did is in the purchase and sale agreement is we literally line itemed everything on those unit turns and said for every unit that doesn't have stone countertops, we get a $1,500 credit. For every unit that doesn't have a backsplash, we get a $1,000 credit. And we went through their unit turns and basically itemized everything and said, we would take your word for it. But if all the units aren't like this, here's what it's going to add up to. And after walking through every unit and making those notes, found out about half of them were fully renovated, and the other half of them had modest updates, but we're missing a few things. So we got about $148,000 credit based on that clause in the agreement.
Was that a surprise to the seller? Do you know?
Yes, they're out of state owners. Probably have not seen the property more than once or twice in their few years of ownership, and they acted surprised. So we're gonna call it a surprise.
Oh man, and with out of state ownership and property manager, you still this is what I always tell investors, especially ones that I coach. I'm like, you have to manage your property management. It's not like you can put in property management and just collect rent checks. You have to manage the manager. All
Yeah,
right.
yeah, and I'm out of state too because I live in Minnesota. We operate in Tucson, and we've got a good partner in Phoenix who goes down there on occasion. But yeah, we're on our phone. We're on the phone with our property manager weekly and going over everything and getting videos of certain things. So yeah, there's definitely a pulse that you got to keep when you're out of state.
Mm-hmm. All right. So was there any other surprises on due diligence that we haven't talked about?
There's a few minor things. Termites were found that we were able to negotiate, and a few other things, but nothing that was out of the ordinary. I said we had kind of that clause in there around the renovations, but we also had a performance clause for collections because we did have a little bit of a drawn out escrow, so we didn't want the property to kind of go into disrepair and have tenants be put in there that weren't paying. So we basically annual averaged their last handful of months of collections and said, by the last reporting period before we close, if you guys don't have that in collections, I think the number was it was like 61,000 bucks. If you guys don't have that in collections, we get 4 times every dollar you're short. So they ended up coming in at like the mid 50s. So we ended up getting a nice little credit there at the end as well, to help cover, the occupancy that we'd have to jump up with.
And did that affect your lending?
No, so all we needed for lending, so we used a local bank. We needed to just have it 85% occupied for the bank to sign off it. And we've done deals with that bank before and have a couple other properties with them. So they were pretty good about everything.
All right. Well, before we move on to the terms of the lending, I want to make sure that we've captured everything on the due diligence. And one thing that I like asking was, what's your overall business plan with this property?
Yeah, so the interiors were really good. Really, it was a rebranding, adding some of the amenities on the exterior space because this was in a location that the surrounding communities had a lot of amenities from common area, barbecue area, dog run, pool area, things along those lines. So we had the majority of the plan was exterior and operations. So we did that. We had about a $680,000 renovation budget, both for the exterior and some of the interior renovations. And then we had a 24 unit that's about a quarter mile away. So we were able to have a full-time property manager, have a full-time maintenance tech, but only pay for a portion of that on this property because we shared it with our sister property, a quarter mile down the road. So operational efficiency with that, some of the amenities that we added on the exterior and some light interior stuff.
All right. So the seller originally was offering the property at over $10 million. You got it down into the 8,000,085 range. And I've only counted up a few $100,000 in credits that came back. How did you close that gap? Like what happened there? Did you just offer less?
From the seller's perspective,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, we originally came in around 875, and then going back before we even had it under contract with the PSA during the LOI, but back and forth with the broker, and after they provided some additional financials where the property, it wasn't completely mismanaged, but it sure wasn't operating to what we had expected once we saw some of those financials. So we knew their motivation. They had a bunch of California properties. I mean, I think it's 1,200 or 1,300 units in the California market. This was their only asset in Tucson, and it was kind of just a thorn in their side. So we kind of knew that. It was also at a time where we knew there wasn't a whole lot of transaction volume, right? I think if I remember that quarter, there was like two properties over 50 units that had transacted in that market in that quarter. So it had like grinded to a halt. So we knew that if they were going to sell and they want to sell, which we knew they did, there weren't a whole lot of other opportunities.
All right. Well, let's move on to the financing. I mean, very different environment than it is today. What, tell it, used a local lender. Tell us, the different structures of the loan. Like, what are the different loan terms here?
Yeah, pretty vanilla. I mean, we've got a local lender down there that we love that is super, super competitive. And that we got it at 5.58, 5.85 with 3 years of IO, 5-year lock, and a 30-year AM. So we felt super good about that. Personally guarantee, it's still it's not like some of the agency stuff where you've got the not the personal guarantee. So but yeah, it's a great lender. We've got, like I said, a couple other properties with them, and at the time the terms were pretty competitive.
And any prepayment penalties, lockout periods, anything like that?
No, that's why we love this lender. So we've got there's no prepayment penalties, like you'll find with a lot of the agency stuff. But at this point in time, we'll probably just keep it with them for the foreseeable future. A lot of times we'll put it with a local lender and then hope to refinance into agency and have it, go to the non-recourse and a little bit more um, better terms for the long term. But at this point in time, we're okay with the recourse considering the state of the property and what we know about that area. So.
And is that built into your overall business plan here to refinance out at some point in time?
We did run a couple different models, but we don't really love to bank on a refinance because we just never know where things are going to be. So this was just a 5 to 7 year hold. Obviously we got the 5-year term on it, so it's probably closer to five. Refinancing with the local bank would be pretty cost efficient if we needed to, but we probably won't refinance into any agency given the prepayments and given the 5 to 7 year hold period.
All right. So you did raise capital on this deal. Tell us how you structured this for your limited partners.
Yeah, so we raised just under 4 million. So it was like 3.95 was the total raise. And honestly, it's super vanilla there too. So like from an investor standpoint, we like to keep it simple because the more complexity it is, I think the more questions investors have and the more skeptical they become of like where's things going and what are the different hurdles and things like that. So it was just a basic 75-25 split with a 7 pref. And really basic from that perspective. So not a whole lot of hoops and hurdles to jump through, just a straight 75-25 split with a 7% preferred return.
And were you the only GP on the deal, or were there other partners?
Yeah, so there's a couple other partners. So we've got this one and a couple other properties down there that we've worked with kind of a couple people revolving, but mostly the core same crew. So we did bring in myself and one of the gentlemen of the primary asset manager on the property where we're day to day, week to week with the property manager and kind of setting the course for that plan that we had set for. And then we did bring in a handful of other partners, both from an investor relations standpoint. There's one of our partners who's down in Phoenix who is very heavy on the CapEx side. So has a lot of the trades, has a lot of the contractors, goes down there pretty frequently to walk properties, check unit turns, check a lot of the major CapEx projects. So he's brought in for that as well.
And how do you, so with that 25 back end split for the general partnership, how do you look to compensate different partners?
Yeah, so good question because I know there's just a slew of different ways to do it. So we allocate a good chunk of it for both capital raising and asset management, because there's a obviously the acquisition side up front. There's a lot of work, right? But this is a 5 to 7 year hold, and the asset management, which is more of a day-to-day, week-to-week time allocation for those general partners, needs to be, I guess, accounted for in the split. So we allocated a heavy amount for both asset management and the capital raising, and then a smaller amount for things like personal, signing on the loan docs, personal guaranteeing, work during the due diligence, sourcing the deal, things like that.
Okay. And then what kind of fees did you charge to this deal?
I was just 2% acquisition fee, 1% asset management fee, no dispo fee or disposition fee or anything along those lines. So
And it sounds like there's a bit of construction on this property. Do you have a construction management fee?
no, we don't. We don't have anything along those lines. We've got, like I said, a good team down there, both from our general partner who's in the area with the trades, as well as with a couple of the properties in there. So no construction management fee or GC fee along those lines.
All right. Well, since you've held this property for a little bit, tell us how things went after takeover. Were there any issues that cropped up?
Yeah, so this is where I'm supposed to tell you this has been like the easiest project ever, and it's tripled in value, and it's just spitting out money. No, this has definitely been a learning experience. So we had a lot of our due diligence and some of our safeguards in place to make sure we took over the property in the best possible situation. What we did is that we actually took over the property, and there was a handful of people on the rent roll that weren't there. I don't know if they were never there or they skipped between the last report we got was June reporting, and we closed in the beginning of August. So there's a little bit of a gap there. But then we went through and evicted a good amount of the tenants. Non-pays and promise to pays were pretty common with the previous manager. And so we went and dropped it from 85% to about 45% within about 3 months. So we went through kind of perfect storm. So we did that. We went into Q4, which is seasonally always pretty low from a leasing perspective. And then Q4 of 2023 was historically low for the last 4 or 5 years. We ran into that really kind of a leasing slowdown that was across the nation, but definitely in the Tucson market. So we definitely learned a lot about, okay, you got to be creative with lease up. How do you just not throw, your ads up and hope people come? But we went and, flyered the market and the gyms and the campuses and the locations that our tenants were. And we ended up signing 50 some leases in the last 6 months. So it's been definitely a lease up process. Thankfully, we bought it so low that our basis is probably 20 to 23% lower than what the rest of the market has those properties going for. But yeah, now we're back up and stabilized a little over a year later, but it was a rough 6 months.
Oh man. Well, hopefully those were the units that needed some love.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Yep. So we got some of those unit turns done, and we had a couple other nice surprises with some of our larger renovation budgets that came in under expected, in some of the additional revenue generating strategies that we had that are on pace a little above schedule to bring in some additional rent with both internet fees. So we did internet on the property and started billing out internet to people, and some of the laundry contracts that we canceled and put in place for our own laundry.
All right. Well, Mike, I have two questions for you as we wrap up. What did you find easy on this deal that quite honestly you thought would be harder? And then to flip it on its head, what did you find that was harder that you actually thought was going to be easier?
Yes. So the easy part, we're not. I say we. I mean me in general. I'm not a massive capital raiser. We've got a handful of investors and a decent list of investors, and we do a couple projects, a year. But that was a little bit easier. So I think over the years of doing this and over a couple of deals and over building that relationship with investors, in a time where a lot of people were having trouble capital raising, for me that was a lot faster and a lot quicker than I anticipated. So that was cool. The thing that was a heck of a lot harder, and I know you said you don't cuss on the show, so I just had to. My filter is on because usually I swear like a sailor. So we're good so far. But yeah, it was definitely that taking it over and like, oh crap, like this was supposed to be a project that was needing little tweaks in operational efficiencies from the properties that we have in the area. It wasn't supposed to be this massive lease up going into the slowest leasing season that we've seen in years. So that definitely challenged us to get out of the box a little bit as far as just not having a vanilla wait and see. Like we were out boots on the ground, hitting the market with our property managers, flying the town and getting that thing leased up because we had to.
Ugh, that's a lot of work, especially if you weren't expecting it.
Yeah, yeah, but it's good. It's turning out well.
Well, Mike, thank you so much for sharing your insights and experience with us here today. If people want to learn more about you, how can they do so?
Yeah, so a couple areas. So you can get me on Instagram. It's at Mike Mo REI, MikeMoeREI. SuperiorCapitalGP.com is the website, or you can just, I'm always happy to chat, text, call 218-310-5947. I always love chatting with newer investors or experienced investors or, other potential partners. So
Fantastic. Well, Mike, again, thank you for sharing your time with us here today. We look forward to hearing about future deals.
yeah, thank you. Appreciate it. It's been fun.